Traveling down that river was a canoe and a ship. And in the canoe were the Haudenosaunee people's values and customs and laws and traditions and governance. And in the ship were the Europeans' customs and values and governments and laws. And we would sail down this river together, but we never set foot in each other's boat. Certainly, the ripples from our wakes would affect the other, and the relationship would be bound by peace, friendship, and respect. But we would be autonomous islands upon ourselves. That relationship is deteriorating. Or the dish with one spoon, a treaty that Anishinaabe people shared with the Haudenosaunee and the English and the French, a commitment to share this land together, its resources. And symbolically, there were no knives at the table, just a spoon. Be a non-violent relationship. How far we've come from those days. It's a relationship that Indigenous peoples have been struggling to retain, struggling to get back. And that's really what Idle No More is all about. But we've been faced with a very hostile government, a government that I would not hesitate to call colonial. And I'm reluctant to say that it's this government, because conservative, liberal, Canadian governments have not deviated significantly from each other in their relationship with Canadians. This is not a new phenomenon. But it is particularly troubling when we have a federal government that currently makes legislation without consulting with Indigenous peoples, makes legislation that affects Indigenous peoples, passes legislation while Indigenous peoples are protesting on the steps of the legislature while they're passing it. Omnibus legislation that severs our relationship with the land, the water, that truncates our responsibilities towards other creatures, non-human entities, in which we also have treaties with. 12 pieces of legislation in the past year and a half this federal government has introduced that impacts Aboriginal rights or treaty rights or our relationship with each other and the land. It might be unprecedented as an assault against Indigenous peoples. Moreover, we have provinces that are equally problematic. Idle No More is largely about the land. Well, it's provinces that have jurisdiction over lands and resources. And if you've been paying attention over the past 10 years in this province alone, you've seen some pretty awful things. Caledonia, where Mohawk peoples protecting land, refusing to surrender land that they've held for 150 years that had been taken away from them without their permission. People at Grassy Narrows in northeastern Ontario who rely on the forest for their medicine and their food, protesting clear-cutting in the longest-lasting blockade in North American history. Ontario government just went to court and argued that their rights as a province, their rights to issue timber harvesting permits are more powerful than the rights of the people of Grassy Narrows to feed themselves. Shameful is absolutely right. Kitchener-Mayukasib Inawag, or the Ardok and Algonquin First Nation peoples, who resist mining, platinum mining, uranium mining on their territories. The provincial governments, the law enforcement apparatus of the provincial governments issue injunctions for them to stop their protests. They refuse. In both cases, protesters went to jail for 6 months. 6 months in jail for doing something that they've done since time immemorial, that they're obligated to do, that's their right to do. Very colonial relationships. And what this has revealed, well, aside from the fact that we have a very large problem, what all of this has revealed is that it's a very powerful machine, it's a very powerful adversary. In 6 months of Idle No More, I'm reluctant to say we've accomplished very little. We've accomplished the raising of consciousness of thousands of Native people, maybe tens of thousands of Native people. We've educated Canadians, and I'm very happy to be here to talk to you for the invitation to be here, and that wouldn't have been possible without Idle No More. But we didn't stop legislation. The federal government seems unfazed, and Idle No More is at a plateau. And we have to decide where to go next and what to do. Do we shift our focus from the federal government to the provinces? Do we open a new front? Do we consider allies? In fact, it might be on this latter point that we'll be most successful. One of the most beautiful things that I saw at Idle No More protests and round dances was the demographics. In most cases, it wasn't Native peoples exclusively, but it was non-Native Canadians that were there dancing, that were holding placards, that were waving signs, and this trend was consistent. For far too long, we've conceptualized reconciliation with Canadians through state processes, through financial buyouts. If you attended residential schools, you get $13,000, and we host these national events across the country to come to some reconciliation. That's not working. Shift our focus to solidarity work, to build allies, to do the kind of stuff that the previous panelists were talking about. In some instances, we have a common enemy, and we can work together. Maybe based on shared interests, but maybe something more than that. Maybe in the spirit of reconciliation. Actual, honest, and genuine reconciliation, which we've never seen in this country, and which Idle No More might provide an opportunity for. So I hope that you consider that. And I hope that you consider Indigenous peoples throughout the work that you do today and this weekend, and throughout the work that you do later this month and this year and into the future. Because I think Indigenous peoples and workers will make pretty good allies. So miigwech. Thank you very much.